Lexie Hall might not have meant to say anything controversial, but what she just revealed could quietly explain everything that's happening inside the Indiana Fever right now. Because while most people are focused on Caitlin Clark, the sold-out arenas, the national headlines, and the viral moments, something much more important is happening behind the scenes. And it's coming from the players who were there before any of this hype even existed. And that's where this gets interesting, because Lexie Hall isn't just another teammate reacting to the moment. She's someone who lived through the version of Indiana that nobody talks about anymore. The version with empty seats, losing seasons, and almost no attention at all. So when she sits down and casually talks about wanting to stay, about loving the environment, about how different everything feels now, that's not just a feel-good quote. That's a signal that something inside this team has shifted in a way that fans are only just starting to understand. And if you really listen to what she said, and more importantly, how she said it, it raises a much bigger question than anyone expected. Is Indiana building something real around Caitlin Clark? Or are they about to face the kind of pressure that tears rising teams apart? Because what Lexie revealed might be the clearest sign yet that the Fever is standing at a turning point, and what happens next could define this team for years. But to really understand why her words matter, you have to look at what they actually revealed. The moment itself didn't feel dramatic. There was no big announcement, no headline quote that immediately blew up across social media, no bold statement that screamed controversy. It was just a conversation, relaxed, casual, and almost too normal to catch attention at first. But that's exactly why it matters, because sometimes the most important things aren't said loudly. They're said comfortably. And that's exactly what happened when Lexie Hall sat down and started talking about Indiana. She wasn't trying to sell anything. She wasn't trying to create a narrative. She wasn't speaking like someone calculating every word for the media. She sounded honest. And when players get honest, that's when you start to see what's really going on behind the scenes. She talked about how much things have grown, how different the experience feels now compared to when she first entered the league, and how the energy around the team has completely changed. But more importantly, she kept coming back to one idea without forcing it. She wants to be there, not in a vague, generic way, not in the usual, "I love my team" type of answer athletes give when they're trying to stay safe. There was something deeper in how she described it. She talked about enjoying coming to the gym, about loving the people around her, about feeling grateful for where she is right now. And that word grateful says more than people realize, because players don't use that word lightly when they're thinking about their future, especially not in a league where contracts, roles, and opportunities can change fast. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Lexie Hall is heading into a situation where she has options. She's not locked into one path. She's not forced to stay. Other teams can come in with offers. Other opportunities can open up. So when someone in that position talks about wanting to stay where they are, that's not random. That's a decision forming in real time. And if you listen closely, you can hear something else underneath it. Comfort. Not the kind of comfort that makes players stagnant, but the kind that comes from being in the right system, around the right people, at the right moment in your career. She understands her role. She fits into the identity of the team. She knows how she contributes, even if she's not always the headline name. And in today's game, that kind of clarity is rare, because a lot of players in her position would be looking at this moment differently. They'd be thinking about maximizing value, expanding roles, testing the market, and seeing what else is out there. But Lex's perspective feels different. It feels like someone who sees what this team is becoming and doesn't want to lose her place in it. And that's where the real meaning starts to take shape. Because when a role player, someone who does the hard, less glamorous work, wants to stay in a system, that usually means the system is working. It means the culture is real. It means the chemistry isn't forced. And most importantly, it means players believe something bigger is being built. But here's the part that people might be overlooking. That belief didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't always like this. In fact, not long ago, Indiana looked like a completely different franchise. And that contrast is what makes everything Lexie said hit even harder. Because once you understand what she experienced before all of this, you start to realize just how dramatic this shift really is, and why her words might carry more weight than anyone expected. Because what changed in Indiana wasn't small. It was everything. Lexie didn't have to say it directly, but you could hear it between the lines. Because when she talked about how much things have changed, she wasn't exaggerating. She was comparing two completely different worlds. And unless you were paying attention back then, it's hard to fully understand just how drastic that shift really is. This wasn't a team that was just building. This was a team that was invisible. We're talking about games where the energy inside the arena felt flat before tip-off even happened. Nights where you could literally see empty sections stretching across the stands. A few thousand fans scattered around trying to create noise in a space that was never full enough to carry it. And for the players on the court, that kind of environment does something to you. It tests you. Because it's one thing to perform when the lights are bright, when the crowd is loud, and when the stakes feel real. But it's something completely different when you're putting in the same effort and barely anyone is watching. That was Indiana. That was the version Lexie Hall walked into at the start of her career. A team that was still trying to figure itself out. A roster filled with talent, but without momentum. A franchise that wasn't being talked about on a national level. And most importantly, a team that wasn't winning enough to demand attention. She mentioned it casually, almost like it was just part of the journey. Winning only a handful of games in a season. Think about that for a second. That kind of record doesn't just affect standings. It affects identity because when a team struggles like that, everything becomes harder. Confidence drops. Media attention disappears. Fan engagement fades. And even internally, it becomes difficult to maintain belief when the results aren't matching the effort. But here's what makes Lex's perspective different. She didn't run from that version of Indiana. She stayed through it. She experienced the frustration, the slow rebuild, and the feeling of showing up every day knowing the outside world wasn't expecting much from your team. And that kind of experience does one of two things to players. It either pushes them away, or it attaches them to the process in a way that outsiders can't fully understand. And with Lexie, it's clear which direction she went. Because when she talks about Indiana now, there's a sense of appreciation that only comes from seeing both sides. She remembers what it felt like when people didn't recognize the team. She remembers when walking through an airport didn't mean anything. No fans stopping you, no cameras, no attention, just another team powerful, because it didn't happen slowly. It didn't build over a decade. It flipped fast almost overnight. And that kind of sudden change doesn't just impact fans. It changes how players experience the game itself. Because suddenly everything feels bigger. Every play matters more. Every mistake is more visible. Every moment carries weight. And for players like Lexie who live through the quiet version of this franchise, that shift isn't just exciting. It's overwhelming in the best way possible. You go from playing in front of a few thousand people to stepping into arenas where every seat is filled. You go from being overlooked to being part of one of the most talked about teams in the league. You go from developing in the background to performing under a spotlight that never turns off. And that's not just a change in numbers. That's a complete transformation of identity. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because that transformation didn't just happen randomly. It didn't come from a slow rebuild finally paying off. It didn't come from years of gradual improvement. It came from one moment, one arrival, one player stepping into the league and instantly shifting the gravity of everything around her. And once that happened, Indiana wasn't the same team anymore. The expectations changed. The attention exploded, and the pressure went to a completely different level, because when everything flips that fast, it forces everyone involved to adjust just as quickly. And that's exactly what happened next. Because what came with that attention wasn't just excitement. It was something much bigger than anyone anticipated. The shift didn't feel gradual. It wasn't one of those slow rebuild stories where a team quietly improves year after year until people finally start paying attention. No, this was different. This was the kind of change you feel immediately. The kind that hits so fast, even the players inside it have to take a second to process what's happening around them. Because the moment Caitlin Clark stepped into Indiana, everything changed. And not just a little, completely. The arenas didn't just get louder, they filled up. Every seat, every night, home games suddenly became events. Not just games, but events. And it didn't stop there. Even on the road, when Indiana showed up, it wasn't just another matchup on the schedule anymore. It became the game. Teams started moving venues, expanding capacity, preparing for crowds they hadn't seen in years. Fans weren't just showing up to support their own teams. They were showing up to see Caitlin. And when that happens, something interesting starts to take place. Because attention doesn't just stay locked on one player. It spreads. It expands. It pulls everyone around that player into the spotlight. And that's exactly what happened to Lexie Hall, because before this, she was doing the same things she's doing now. Playing hard, defending, running the floor, and doing the small things that don't always show up in highlight clips but win games. The difference. Back then, most people didn't see it. Now, everyone does. Now, fans are noticing the hustle plays. Now, analysts are talking about her role. Now, jerseys with her number are showing up in the crowd. And that right there is the real effect. It's not just about Caitlin Clark putting up numbers or hitting deep shots. It's about how her presence elevates the visibility of everyone around her. And for a player like Lexie, that changes everything. Because in sports, recognition isn't just about talent. It's about timing. It's about the environment. It's about being in a situation where what you do actually gets seen, appreciated and understood. And suddenly Lexie is in that exact situation. But here's where it gets even more complex. Because with that visibility comes expectation. And expectation changes the way everything feels. Now when you step on the court, it's not just about playing your role. It's about performing in front of thousands of people who are watching every movement, every defensive stop, every missed rotation, and every small mistake that might have gone unnoticed before now gets seen, analyzed and talked about. And for some players, that kind of pressure can break them. It can make them hesitate. It can take away the natural flow of their game. But Lexie, she leaned into it. She didn't try to become something she's not. She didn't chase headlines. She stayed in her lane, and somehow that made her even more valuable. Because when you have a star like Caitlin Clark commanding attention, you need players who can stabilize everything around that energy. Players who don't get distracted. Players who don't overcomplicate their role. And players who understand that winning isn't always about being the loudest name. Sometimes it's about being the most reliable one. And that's exactly where Lexie fits. She became one of those players you don't fully appreciate until you watch closely. The kind of player coaches trust, the kind of player teammates rely on, and the kind of player fans start to respect more and more the longer they watch. And that's why her voice matters right now. Because she's not speaking from hype. She's speaking from experience inside the shift. She felt what it was like before. She's living what it feels like now. And she understands something that most people outside the team don't. This kind of rapid rise comes with a cost. Because when a team goes from overlooked to center stage, it doesn't just create opportunity. It creates pressure, expectations, and decisions that have to be made fast. And that's where the story starts to turn. Because while fans are enjoying the rise, and while players are embracing the moment, there's another layer building underneath everything. A layer that isn't as visible. A layer that doesn't show up in highlights or crowd reactions. But it's there and it's growing. Because when a team rises this quickly, the question is no longer can they get attention. It becomes something much more serious. Can they handle what comes with it? And more importantly, can they keep it together before that pressure starts pulling things apart? Because what looks like momentum on the outside sometimes feels very different on the inside. And that's exactly where things start to get complicated.